we have another high school football season is over, and so we did the thing during the midseason where we did some predictions. We're gonna revisit some of those questions, see how we did, good or bad. But first, I want to start off with a couple of memories, a couple of memorable moments that you guys remember seeing when you were out at football games this year. The memorable plays, memorable moments. Let's start with Will. Will, you got something for us?
I do. Yeah, it was week 4, Union against Prairie. Falcons were down late in the fourth quarter. They were backed up all the way to 4th and 24, and Devin Viju, as he did all season this year, scrambled, kept the play alive, and hit Tommy Vick in the end zone for a go-ahead touchdown. Just really summed up the season they had in terms of just Viju's rare ability to run and scramble and throw with that experienced group of receivers, and that was a key win for him. It moved him to, I think, 3-1 on the season, and then ultimately they went on to clinch a postseason berth. So that was, to me, that was like the biggest wow play I saw during the year, just like for the degree of difficulty and just kind of the overall improbability of it, and still able to make a play in a situation like that.
Yeah, I think Viju made a habit of making those kinds of plays throughout the year, but that was certainly a memorable one. Micah, what do you got for us?
Well, we've watched enough high school football over our years that we know how rare it is for things to basically repeat themselves. And so I'm going to go to Seton Catholic versus La Center in the first round of the 1A state playoffs, and a result that was basically a repeat of their Trico League showdown 2 weeks earlier. Once again, it came down to a close, low-scoring game. Once again, La Center had the ball with a chance to either take the lead or tie in the game's final minute. And once again, it was Seton Catholic coming through with a big defensive stand. In this case, it was Uriah Carlston making an interception inside the game's final minute to clinch a 14-7 win and sent the Cougars into the state quarterfinals. So it's kind of like, wait a minute, didn't this just happen? And yes, it did.
Those are two great games to finish the year for the 1As. I had a hard time nailing down one in particular because I had two plays that I watched this year that were pretty special and memorable. I've been covering high school football for 35 years, and every time that comes out of my mouth, it's kind of hard to believe. But I don't think in all those years I'd ever seen a 99-yard touchdown play from scrimmage, and that's what I got to witness. I believe it was week 8, Evergreen and Heritage. Heritage recovers a fumble on their own 1-yard line, and on the first play from scrimmage, Owen Daly hits Braden Oster and goes 99 yards for a touchdown for the Timberwolves. Evergreen would later come back and win that game, but it was a memorable moment for the Timberwolves. And then just for as sort of pure sort of excitement play was in the playoffs against Tumwater Washougal. Royce Jones, another player this year we saw make a lot of amazing runs during the course of the year. He catches a short screen pass. Looked like he's going to be tackled short of a first down. He gets tackled and pulled down on the defender and gets tackled right back onto his feet, gets up, and he goes 72 yards for a touchdown. Got Washougal back within 7-6 early in that game. They would go on to lose, but it was certainly a highlight moment for the Panthers in the postseason. So those are two special plays for me.
We're not going to talk about the field goal at the Evergreen.
Will and I, we were wondering whether you were going to bring that one up or not. But
I
we'll
think
leave that.
Covered that.
Yeah. And by the way, on the Prairie play, I did hear from a Union parent who alleged there was a big blindside block on the play. So in the theme of this year, we're second guessing the officials, but I didn't even want to bring it up then because we've covered that ground already. So we're moving on.
All right, so we're going to move back to revisit some of our mid-season predictions, and for folks who don't remember what we did back there, I think it was week 5 of the season we did this. So basically, it was 5 questions that we each had to answer, yes or no. Did we think this was going to happen? And then we give point values based on how confident we were in that thing happening. So we're going to revisit these questions now and see how we did. Cool. All right, so first question that we revisited was, would there be a league tiebreaker after week 9 in any of the 4 leagues that we cover? And this was one of the questions that we were all in agreement and all confidently in agreement. All 3 of us said yes. Micah put his 5 point on this one. Will and I both put our 4 points on this one. And it didn't happen.
We were wrong. We are not Prepstradamus is not here.
And the funny thing too about when I was going back and watching the episode from week 5, it's not only that we all missed that, but the ones that we talked about, the leagues that we talked about the most, that we thought, oh, this is where it's going to happen. We were talking about the 3A Greater St. Helens League and Evergreen and Prairie and Heritage, and we were talking about the 2A Greater St. Helens League with the jumbled mass of teams, Ridgefield and Columbia River and Mark Morris and Woodland. And it turned out that those were the leagues where, as we moved into week 9, there was the least chance of having the tiebreaker. The leagues that we actually had a better chance of having a tiebreaker were down at the Trico and the 4A. In the Trico, we would have had a tiebreaker had Castle Rock beaten Kalama in week 9. Kalama ended up winning that game comfortably, so there was no tiebreaker. But the closer one was in the 4A, where if Skyview had beaten Camas in week 9, there would have been a 3-way tie. In fact, even when I got to that game, and I was talking, because I think I covered a game earlier that evening, and I came to that game later, and the folks at Camas are already talking about, what would happen, the coin flips, and how it was going to all work. And that was a game that Skyview was up, I think, 10-0 at halftime, and they led into the third quarter, and it came down to a last-second field goal for Camas. So,
wasn't there a situation like they were talking about having to get Mike Woodward to come out to the field or something like that, like from his game?
They wanted to do a coin flip to decide, because you have a 3-team tiebreaker. What you do is you have a coin flip to decide which team gets the first bye, and then the other 2 teams play a tiebreaker, and the loser would have been the team eliminated, and then the other 2 teams play for the other spot. The Battleground that week played Union on Thursday, so they were not playing on it that day, and so they were going to have to try to figure out a way that everyone could witness this coin toss and make sure that it was done on the up and up, and it turned out it didn't have to happen because it didn't have a tiebreaker.
All right. Yeah, that was interesting too, because I remember that week 9 on Thursday, I covered that Battleground Union game, and after Battleground 1, it was like, well, they clinched something beyond the regular season, but we don't really know yet what it is. It's just they might be in a tiebreaker, they might be in second place. Obviously, they were rooting for Camas the next day, and I feel like it gets forgotten, but that Camas Skyview game was interesting for at least a half, and Camas had to win it on a game-winning field goal, and pretty dramatic moment to close the regular season in the 4A GSHL.
That brings us to our second question, which was, would Skyview once again advance to the playoffs, which they had done something like 14 the previous 15 years or something like that. And Will said yes, confidently with a 5. Micah said no with a 1, and I said yes with a 1. And as it turned out, only Micah was correct on that one.
Well, I take no joy in predicting someone or some team does not advance, but I think I was coming to that from not only the perspective of we hadn't really seen Skyview at that point of the season. They had started the first half of their year on the road, and I was feeling very shaky about that prediction once I actually got to see Skyview in their first home game. They played, I think, Chiefs South in a non-league game that they won pretty convincingly, but I was coming to it also from the perspective of having seen Battleground play some of their best football early in the year, and that turned out to be the game that really decided that second 4A Greater St. Helens League playoff seed was the Week 8 game between Battleground and Skyview. It was probably Battleground's best win of the year. They won a physical, hard-fought game, one that they really sort of dictated the tempo, and so in hindsight, I feel like my prediction was based on some pretty solid footing. But I'm going to go out on another prediction and say that Skyview's drought does not last longer than 1 year. They have a lot of pieces coming back.
Yeah, when I was going back and looking at this, I remember in the moment you guys were pretty surprised when I raised that 5 up, and maybe I should have known that I was going to be off on that one, but at the time I felt like I just kind of read a little too much into Battleground. I think they were in the midst of a little losing streak at that point in the season after starting hot, and we still weren't quite sure where Union was at, and to me the Skyview was just the unknown, and they played such a tough schedule, so I was like, maybe that's all it is. But Battleground, credit to them, they really turned it around in that home stretch of the season and beating both Skyview and Union for the same year, the only time they've done that in program history. So I am happy to admit I was wrong on that one.
Yeah, for me, as I went through this process, I was watching the episode to figure out what our responses were. I thought my response to this one was no, and it turned out I said yes. But again, it's kind of like the most recent reflection, or the most recent thing I saw. So I had seen Battleground play the week before. I think they played Cascade Christian and lost in overtime to a 1A team, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, yeah, maybe Skyview finds a way. But again, like we were just talking in the tiebreaker situation, it was a very close way of breaking one way or the other on this one. So. At least Skyview had they won that game against Cameron, would at least been in a tiebreaker to potentially go to the playoffs. So, yeah. And again, I put my one on it because again we didn't really know, and I think we were even talking that week that you were going to go out and see them to play Decatur.
Yeah.
That weekend, and then they ended up not playing Decatur because Decatur withdrew, and so it ended up being another week before you saw them. Okay. So the next one was also about a team: are they going to make the playoffs or not? And that was Heritage ending a long playoff streak. And Will came in with a no and a number 2. And Micah said yes with a number 2. And I said yes with a number 3. And the Timberwolves didn't make the playoffs.
Oh, they came close. They came
They came very, very close. Again, this is another way these things break in. They just kind of break the wrong way. And I think for me, it was a little bit of sentimentality. I think anytime you have a team that hasn't had success for a long time, you're like, oh, you want to see that. I remember like last year, I think Meg did a story on the Fort Vancouver boys basketball team making it to the playoffs. It's like, yeah, that's cool. We like teams don't, so I was really kind of hoping Heritage had done some really good things in the preseason, and I still think they're our team on the rise. They got a lot of young players coming back, and again, it was very, very close. Came down to one play, whether or not they go to the playoffs or not, and so they came up short.
Yeah, Michael, just like you said with Skyview, I mean, I definitely don't take any delight in getting this one right. And although it was technically right, I feel like Heritage really did show me something down the stretch with how they were able to hang with both Evergreen and Prairie and had a couple things bounce differently. They could have won easily both of those games, not just the one they needed. And like you said, I think they're a team on the rise, and I feel like they have to be thinking after the season, they are so close to breaking into that top half. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting offseason for the program to kind of build momentum, and they're going to be a fascinating team to watch next year.
Well, yeah, because I think it's a numbers game when it comes to high school football, and any of us that paid a visit to Heritage for a practice or saw them during a game, it's the difference in having 35 kids out versus having 85 kids on the sideline. And Heritage has gone from being few numbers, few players, no depth, but now they have playmakers, they have experience, they have a stability in the coaching staff, which I think is huge. And I think just like I said, Skyview is going to end that playoff drought. I think Heritage next year has a very good chance of ending their playoff drought.
All right, number 4 question involved the 2A Greater St. Helens League. Last year, the 2A GSHL went 0-5 in the Week 10 playoffs. This year, they only had 3 teams make it to Week 10 because Mark Morris got eliminated in the crossover pigtail half game with Aberdeen. So the question was, does the 2A GSHL win a Week 10 game this year? Will said yes with the number 3. Micah said yes with the number 3. And I said no with the number 2. And Washougal got the win over Fife.
You had no faith in the Shoogies? Come on.
Well, I was at that game because Meg Wachnick was covering for it, but I was shooting photos. And I remember first quarter, we were both at the back of the end zone. She was shooting video, I was shooting photos. And Fife went up 15-0. And she's like going, it's really hard to come back from 2 touchdowns in the playoffs. And so, yeah, in the first quarter, it was like, this doesn't look really good. But then, I think there was Casey Crosby went for a big screenplay and took it in for a big touchdown. Royce Jones had a long touchdown run. Defense started playing better. Again, came down to a last-second touchdown, but Washougal, and actually I think Washougal, I think they would even say that they probably should have won that game by maybe a couple touchdowns. They had opportunities. They fumbled at the 1-yard line. They had a 4th down play where, I think the Triple Ace sort of lost where the the down marker needed to be. He was like trying to do a lateral move on a player and end up slipping and falling down short. So they had an opportunity to win that game more comfortably, but also Fife had one of their running backs hurt in the first quarter as well. So who knows? But I think this is also kind of a mid-season thing. I think Washougal got a whole lot better as the season went on. I remember we were talking before they played River, and you said, I think Washougal's going to win that by a couple touchdowns. And I wasn't quite sure, and they ended up winning by like 3 touchdowns and stuff like that. So I think Washougal kind of separated themselves from the rest of the 2A GSHL this year. The rest of the 2A GSHL in Week 10 did not do especially well. They both got shut out in Week 10. So I think Washougal really did separate themselves this year.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a league-wide thing that we've seen over the last couple of years, that while very evenly matched and very entertaining on a whole statewide, the 2A GSHL is probably a step below some of the other certainly some of the other teams statewide, and I think Washougal saw that when they drew Tumwater Rally rather in the first round of the state playoffs. But we've been blessed in that that has been one of the most intriguing leagues in recent years for us to follow.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, River and Ridgefield not faring so well in tough matchups against Anacortes and WF West. And then obviously we saw in the seeding that unfortunately the 2A GSHL is still not very highly regarded around the state. I think Washougal got a 15 seed against Tumwater. And so, yeah, I mean, I think still a lot to prove for the league. But I still feel like as it pertained to like the top 3 in the league, I mean, it seemed like it was a pretty strong group, and for Washougal to be able to separate this year instead of just kind of hang in this kind of fluky parity-filled league, I feel like they kind of proved something with being able to win it, not having to do it by a tiebreaker, not having to win in Week 9. They took care of business early and wrapped it up.
Well, not just Washougal, it wasn't just them that got better throughout the year. River did as well.
For sure.
I think River really found their identity. They relied on some of their senior leadership, especially Savion McCoy and Joey Ianello. And I think they would have given WF West a tougher fight in Week 10 had not their quarterback gotten hurt so early. So that's kind of one of those fluky things that you hope doesn't happen, but definitely kudos to those 2 programs for getting better as the weeks went on.
Agreed.
Right, and I think also I think when I tweeted out the final score of Washougal Tumwater, I think it was like 49-6. I think some of the reactions on Twitter was like, oh well, that was pretty typical or a classic beatdown, but Washougal was competitive. They were in it. They were down 20-6 at halftime. They had a couple of good drives. They just didn't finish it out with touchdowns, and of course Tumwater scores every time they have the ball, and so you can't. You have to be able to keep up. And I think if you look through Tumwater, they're playing the state championship game this weekend. I think they won 42-0 in the semifinal last week, and so it's a really good program, a really good team. And I thought Washougal held themselves well against the Thunderbirds in Week 10. So last question, and we know the answer to this one. Are we going to have any teams reach the state semifinals, which is something that was kind of a 50-50 thing over the last 15 years. We had 2 teams in the state championship last year. This is another one we were unanimous. We all said, no, we're not going to have a team make the state championship, our state semifinals. Will gave it 1 point. Micah gave it 4 points, and I gave it 5 points, which is my saving grace in this activity. I think, I remember like after that Washougal Fife game, I remember mentioning to Meg, I was like, is this the last football game you're going to see? And I mentioned that when Will got back in the office, and he was like, yeah.
Well, and I think we both, when we recorded that earlier episode making that prediction, we both based that on not any comment on the strength or lack thereof of any of the teams down here this year, but just how hard it is to make the state semifinals in any sport, in any classification. And I think the previous year, we really had stars align on several fronts, not only in that you had a Camas team that just had all the pieces to make a deep run, but also with Seton Catholic making it to the state title game, they got that first round bye in a draw that allowed them to, and even people forget, like they had a very tough quarterfinal matchup in that tournament against Live Christian, and then had to beat a very tough Montesano team. And so I think when we sort of saw the writing on the wall on the 1A that whoever was going to come out of the Trico was probably going to be in that seeding range where you might run into Royal in the the quarterfinals, and that's what happened with. I don't think we foresaw La Center and Seton Catholic being matched against each other. Basically, not only did that eliminate one of our chances of getting a team a little farther, it guaranteed one team. It's kind of like splitting the baby there. But when we saw that the winner of that got the rematch against Royal in Seton Catholic's case, I was like, okay, this one's going to be tough.
And it's really kind of a reminder to me of just how small the margin for error is during the regular season for, a Seton Catholic team that lost in week 1 to River. I think lost once to Banks, a team from Oregon, and then I think La Center was a 2-loss team going into the postseason as well. And unfortunately, that was enough to kind of get them seeded into that almost impossible position, like you just said. And Camas too, they had a couple tough ones in the regular season against very good teams in Mount Tahoma and Westland of Oregon also. But it's I think the year before both were undefeated going into that playoff. So it's tough sometimes, like when you're putting together a resume and you have a loss or two, and that's all it takes kind of to get bumped out of favorable seeding.
Yeah, you kind of think of that Banks game they lost. I think it was in like week 4 or 5. That was a game they were supposed to play Columbia White Salmon, and then Columbia White Salmon decided to go independent. If Columbia White Salmon plays a Trico League schedule, Seton's playing Columbia White Salmon, and they win that game, and instead of being 7-2 going into or 8-2, or instead of being 8-2, they're 9-1 going into the state seeding process. Maybe they're not an 8. Maybe they can get a 6, and at that time the alignment towards the semifinals gets a little bit easier than running into Royal. So or even if they scheduled somebody other than a really good Banks team, if they'd scheduled somebody else and got a win, that 2 losses and 1 losses can sometimes swing the committee on that. And so it's tough. Sumner is back in the state championship game, and they had to do it by knocking off number 1 Puyallup, which is a team I think they lost to in the regular season.
Yeah, that sounded like it was just a great high school football game.
Yeah.
High scoring, wild swings.
I was at the Camas Davis basketball game on Saturday, and I think it was like at halftime or maybe sometime before the game, the Davis fans who had made the trip out from Yakko, they were all talking about that game because the running back for Sumner, who went for like 300 yards, was at Davis last year. So sometimes, you can keep the wheels turning for success if you get a star player to come over for you. So
Cam's had a few of those this year too.
Yeah. So it's it's just one of those things, and again, I think it's just hard. It's just hard to make the semifinals in anything. So what was also hard was doing well on this exercise.
So any prediction we make in the future, take that with a grain of salt.
So the way it worked out is Micah and Will both went 3-2 in this process, both 3-2, and I went 1-4. However, if you do the point system, it's a little bit better. I ended up with 5 points because I put my 5 point on the one I got right. Will was 3-2, but only got 6 points on what he got, and Micah got 8 points on his 3-2. So Micah is the winner of this exercise, although considering that we could have scored as many as 15 points.
I'm basically the winner of the losers here.
Basically.
Yeah. Well, that was a fun exercise. I think it's good not only to have a little bit of amusement and kind of look into the future and sort of take the pulse of how we think the league is going, but I think it helps us narrow in on some trends that I think sort of encapsulate the last football season, because years. There were some pretty interesting storylines. Heritage, you called it, Skyview playing their. I don't think any football team in this area is going to have a roller coaster ride the way Skyview did, with starting on the road and then having cancellations and just at one point just hoping to get a game, and then also ending on a reminder that it's special to make it really deep in the state playoffs, and that any team, whether it's a perennial powerhouse or a newcomer, should never take that for granted.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about looking forward next year to Skyview and Heritage. Is anything else you guys are looking forward to in 2026? Something that you're interested in seeing?
Oh boy, can I survive basketball season?
Yeah, I was gonna say. Don't ask for my basketball predictions because I got nothing.
Greater St. Helens League doing the double dip, the double round.
Yes,
will be interesting to see how that.
I'm very interested in that subplot because I feel like I'm the only one around that actually is a fan of that format. I think from what we've heard, coaches don't necessarily like it, administrators don't necessarily like it, and I was the one who's like, why don't they do this? Why don't they cut down on travel? Why don't they dance with the partners they know from the area, and why not get a little, revenge mixed in to try to get back and make up for possibly an earlier loss? So I'm very excited to see how that goes, and I would love for a very muddled, dramatic, revenge-driven 4A Greater St. Helens League, even if it comes at the cost of having a team or two put up a really great final record for seeding. I think that was one of the other drawbacks. It's like, well, if we happen to be really evenly matched in this league this year, we just beat up on each other, and then that hurts.
Right. Yeah. That's my only concern, obviously, because it feels like that it does hurt the teams, I think, in Southwest Washington probably to a greater degree when they don't travel out of the area. But yeah, I think, like you said, I'm really interested to see those rematch games and just kind of how teams adjust to each other in the same season. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll have kind of a Sumner Puyallup situation where one team beats up on each other the first time around and then the tables turn the second time. So that'll be really interesting to see. And yeah, hopefully everybody gets through it mostly unscathed and it's not too intense, but hopefully it's ultimately a good thing for our area football teams.
Well, I'm also very curious to see when you talk about the 4A, 3A crossover week, the dynamic nature of that, how you're pairing the top teams in each league for that. And I think whoever wins that game gets an extra feather in their cap in that they add another high-quality win against another high-quality opponent. I think the loser of that game is going to be like, well, yeah, we got a tough mid-season test, but did we gain anything from the experience? I think that's going to be an interesting talking point.
So next year that would be Camas, Kelso, Evergreen, Battleground, and then Prairie, Skyview.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
That sounds like an interesting slate.
Right, and then and then Union Heritage.
Yeah,
would be the first.
Okay.
And then Mountain View and Shelton would be looking for non-league games that week. So I think it's interesting. So high school football schedules, they get made on 2-year cycles, and so this was the second year of the schedule cycle. So teams will be going out looking for new non-league opponents. It will be a little bit interesting in next year because of this the 4A JSHL playing 2 rounds of league play, or 6 league games plus that crossover is the 7th game. So basically, pretty much all of the leagues other than the 3A are going to have non-league, and then their schedule is pretty much going to be set from weeks 3 to 9. For at least for the 2A, the Trico, and the 4A, the 3A, they have a 16 league, so it'll be 1 more non-league game. So the opportunity to see other teams from other areas, or it's just going to be week 1 and week 2 pretty much, and then we're going to be into at least either a league game or sort of a fixed.
Well, and I never liked it that the 4A Greater St. Helens League waited so long to get into league play. It's kind of like you enter week 5 and you're kind of like, all right, we're still playing non-league games in this league while everybody else is knee-deep in their league play. So that's another reason I'm a fan of the double round in the 4A Greater St. Helens League. Let's be playing league games by week 5 or week 4 and not kind of mess around with these, this extended preseason.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Well, that was the football season. The last bit of business that we have to deal with the football season is the reveal of our all-region football team, which we will do next week, and we're going to do that live. So, do we have a date? Do we have a time?
We do. It's going to be Thursday, December 11th, 6 or 6:30. Tune in at 6. We'll have some stuff going on.
We'll do it live.
Yeah, well, but yeah, this is another new thing we're trying. We've kind of made a habit here in the Columbian Sports Department of saying why not instead of why. Varsity360 Preps YouTube channel next Thursday at 6 p.m.
All right. We'll see you all then.
See you then.